Hello, I'm Chris Flisher, and welcome to Turning of the Wheel, an intelligent, lively discussion on astrology, art, and adventure. Timing is everything, and as the great wheel turns, we are best prepared when we are best informed. Join me as I explore the current planetary alignments and offer insights for coping with change. Educational, informative, enlightening, the Turning of the Wheel is a welcome pause in your daily swirl of constant change. Through intelligent discourse, inspired guests, and educational segments, I will help to enlighten your knowledge of astrology and guide you to accept change as the great wheel of life turns. Call in with your questions and speak with some of the greatest visionaries in the time-tested practice of astrology. Turning of the Wheel, Astrology, Art, and Adventure with Chris Flisher, each week on Turning of the Wheel podcast. Hello and welcome to Turning of the Wheel. My name is Chris Flisher and this is a show about astrology. And what could be more exciting than astrology in this time that we're living in where, believe it or not, everything that the astrologers and all of us were talking about 10 years ago are now coming to fruition. We didn't know if it was going to be a pandemic. We didn't know if it was going to be a war. We didn't know if it was going to be financial. We didn't know if it was going to be political. But we knew it was going to be something really big, a game changer of the highest order. And here we are with a game changer of the highest order. Who knows where we go from here? But it's a fascinating time. I got a great guest, one of my favorite astrologers of all time, coming on in a minute. And we're going to talk about what's going on with the Sabian Symbols. Fascinating subject in itself. And before we do that, I want to remind you about my newsletter, which goes out every Sunday afternoon. In there, I have a couple of paragraphs of mundane astrology so you know what's going on in the world that affects all of us. And then I break out into signs. I also have links there to all my podcasts, all my artwork. And there's also a donate button there if you feel so inclined, which I hope you do, because you know astrologers don't live on a lot very much these days. Anyway, let's get on with the show. My guest today is the one and only Lynda Hill, who is the author of the Sabian Symbols and Oracle book. It came out years ago. And the story of the Sabian Symbols is a fascinating story in itself. And I've repeated this before, but I think it's worth a quick summation, if you could give us that, Lynda. Lynda Hill is here. Her website is sabiansymbols.com. And Lynda, just give us a real quick, snapshot so people get their minds refreshed as to what the Sabian Symbols are all about. The whole Elsie Wheeler story, very quickly.
Yeah, very quickly. They came through in 1925. There's 360 degrees in the zodiac, as we know. And what they did in 1925 was they came up with a symbolic image, but it's a phrase. It's not particularly a picture. A phrase like the dentist at work or the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow or the bridge, it means something, and we live these things out. And so in 1925, Elsie Wheeler described each degree of the zodiac in a double-blind test. She didn't know what degree or sign she was assigning an image to. And it was supposed to have come through from the Sabian alchemists who were in Haran some 2,000 years ago. Abraham himself was a Sabian alchemist. One day I want to write that story, because Abraham, before he was taken by the other religions, was actually an astrologer. Huh. And no one talks about that. I
didn't know that myself. Yeah, I didn't know that. Yeah.
Yeah. The Sabians were into the planets, of course, out to Saturn. That's all they knew then. But they did talismans and they built temples to the planets. I went out to this area the year before last. It's right near the Syrian border. And that was pretty amazing. And
It must have been pretty intense at the time.
Well, it was really. And, they just had all this, Syrian refugees coming across to where I was too.
Mm-hmm.
There was a lot of Syrian refugees. It was extremely hot. I think in Celsius nowadays, but it was 54 degrees Celsius, which is like 130 degrees or something. I mean, it was.
Well, this is actually the birthplace of astrology, isn't it? You're right, the cradle.
That's exactly right.
In the cradle.
That's exactly right, and also the birthplace of the first university in the world, which I find to be really interesting. In the place where astrology flourished was the location of the first university in the world. I saw the ruins up the hill, but none of us were into walking up there in this extreme heat. In July,
too hot. I can see.
Yeah, too hot. But yeah, so the Sabian symbols they're a phrase, but they have a great deal of meaning, and they describe how we live our lives. Whether it's our sun, our Mercury, our Venus, or Jupiter, they will have meaning for us, and they will show us things that will come true in our lives.
But
They're extremely amazing.
also they
So
were derived in a sort of a psychic experiment which seems as if it was a sort of a channeling experience, like a bolt, like a Uranian bolt of lightning that came down through this person and formulated these images that happened in very random process, but yet incredibly accurate for the time and the degree. It almost seems as if it's divine intervention. I would have to say that that's the only way I can see that is through divine intervention, because to have these symbols be so accurate and so prescient for the time and to be so reflective of it blows your mind. It seriously does. And so, and the reason I wanted to talk about this today with you, Lynda, was because Pluto has just gone retrograde and is going to be moving its way back into Capricorn. And a retrograde of all sorts is always a time to reflect and renew and reconsider where we've been. I see them as more inward looking rather than outward looking, and I don't see them as fearful at all, retrogrades in general. And so Pluto going retrograde is going to go back, and it's going to get into the degrees. And as it goes over those degrees that it has already transited, so it's going to be 25, 24, 23, it gets back as far as 22. What do the Sabian symbols say there that gives you some sort of insight into where we might be headed?
Well, it's really interesting. It's like when this whole COVID thing came out and people were really starting to isolate and understand what this is about, Pluto and Jupiter were on the nun entering the convent.
Oh, wow.
So yeah.
Isolation.
And
Isolation.
And absolutely. And Saturn's also been over that degree as well. Saturn and Pluto were conjunct on that earlier, like last year.
Yeah.
So the nun entering the convent, when I put that up on Facebook, people went, "Oh my God, how accurate is that?"
It's perfect,
So Pluto is going to be spending a lot of time on that. Later this year, it's going to come back to that degree. But we're going to be feeling the feeling of it. Pluto will retrograde onto that degree again in the beginning of July, and it'll be on it right through August. And they're already talking about later in this year we're going to be isolated again, if indeed we come out of isolation. And they're talking about till 2022, which makes my hair stand on end, because I don't know how our supply of food and everything is going to go. But I just would like to segue into that idea of food, because I'm not hearing many people talk about this. It's not only food, it's our supplies.
Yeah.
And what I find really interesting is that on the 9th of March, the Sabian symbol for the full moon was a caravan of cars headed for the west coast. Now that's Virgo 20. And I immediately, I've always seen this degree of Virgo 20, the caravan of cars. Well, it can talk about caravans, it can talk about cars, it can talk about holidays, it can talk about getting away, but it can also talk about the provision of food and supplies. It's trucking companies. It's trucks.
Yeah, it's the supply chain.
Yeah, and so what I find so really interesting is to go into the Sabian symbols without wanting to confuse anybody, but if you look at the sun on that day, so the degree that's exactly opposite that full moon at the beginning of March was the table set for an evening meal. It's Pisces 20. So Virgo 20 is the trucks. Pisces 20 is the table set for an evening meal. Gemini 20 going on the Grand Cross, because you can do that.
Right,
because
of course. Yep.
What the symbols mean, is a cafeteria.
And then the Sagittarius 20?
Is refrigeration.
Wow.
Now,
that's a perfect alignment of those four mutable signs. Yeah, mutable characteristics.
And so, of course, a full moon is major, and as we know, the energy of the full moon doesn't just suddenly disappear. It stays with us as part of a process, as an unfolding. But what's really interesting me is that Neptune's been on that degree. Well, it's on that degree right now. Neptune is on the table set for an evening meal, is it the table set for? Yes, it's a table set for an evening meal. And when it goes retrograde on. I do have to look this up. I've got all this in my head, but sometimes my brain.
Pluto goes retrograde on the 25th of April. Is that what you're talking about? Yeah.
Yeah. I'll speak more about Pluto because I want to come back. That's right. It's not Neptune I'm looking at. It's Venus. Now Venus is going retrograde.
Venus retrograde, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and that's enormous. Venus is going retrograde on the dancing couples that crowd the barn in a harvest festival.
Right.
It's like we're not allowed to crowd the barn. Are we really going to be having a harvest festival? Are we going to be celebrating the fruits of our culture and all the things that we have available to us? or are we going to be going, heck, they've run out of toilet paper, tissues,
Well,
paper towels?
I see it as we have major retrogrades happening one after another. We have Saturn,
That's
we have
right.
Venus, we have Jupiter, all going retrograde within 2 or 3 days of each other. And I think it's a time.
Exactly.
I think it's a time where all of us have to stop and say, okay, what is going on here? So we've seen the results of what has happened with the environment, how much it's changed in this period
Yeah,
of, it's remarkable. The skies are clear, people
that's
are
right.
clear, lots of new connections. It's a 90-degree turn from where we were going. It's almost like we were running down the highway and boom, hit the wall and went left. Or I hope it's left.
Yes.
Anyway, and all of a sudden we're in this new parallel universe where everything is remarkably different. And I think it brings up a lot of old ideas, which is all very Capricornian. It's very foundational. It's all about the roots of our families. It's Capricorn Cancer axis, going on. The family, the home, the environment, and how we review that. And I like it because it really brings us to a place in time where we have to reconsider what is really important. And that is a major wake-up call, because if we did not have that wake-up call, we would get lost in the swirl of electronic distraction. We would just get lost because Facebook has just driven us away. We would not take time to say, wow, I miss my father, I miss my son, I miss my daughter. That is what it's bringing to light, as well as clearing the system. It's really a gigantic purge.
Well, it's interesting you say that because Jupiter is going retrograde soon,
Yeah, and
in
Saturn.
mid-May,
Yeah.
and it goes retrograde on a degree that really talks about the internet, and it really
It's
talks about listening to
27 Capricorn?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's the large aviary, and the large aviary is many voices, many birds flitting around, with branches, with all the birds. So I've long seen the large aviary, which is also the Pluto in the USA's chart, the Sibley chart.
Yeah. That's the one I
A
use.
lot of it is used. Yeah, I use it too. It really sings, especially with the Sabian symbols.
To me,
But
it
here's
does,
what
yeah.
yeah, totally, totally. But I mean, I think that any chart that anybody looks at is going to work because that's the nature of consciousness. Like if they believe another chart, then that will work for them. But I really like the Sibley chart. But what I'm really, really seeing here, I'll come back to Pluto because that's of incredible importance. But with Venus, it's really interesting, Chris. Venus going retrograde in Gemini, there's more going on strike Sabian symbols in Gemini than anywhere else. And Venus retrograde has not only gone over them. Now, there's many ways of us going on strike. We're staying at home, not going out.
Right.
But some of us aren't believing what the government's telling us. Some people are cranky because the government hasn't sent them their money or whatever it happens to be. There's, like imbalances. Venus is going to go retrograde over all of those going on strike degrees, including the one that's immediately before the retrograde point. The one that's before the dancing couples crowding the barn, which we're not able to do, right? We're
Right.
not, we can
Right.
dance.
So it's
but
always
we're gonna be
it's
dancing.
the inverse. It's the inverse. Yeah.
It's the inverse of that idea, and it's a major going on strike degree. I do have to look it up. Because it's a tumultuous labour demonstration. So that's right before the retrograde point. So Venus is gonna sit on that for a number of days. The tumultuous labour demonstration, but it's going to go over like 5 points in Gemini that speak about standing up for your rights, wanting better rights, obviously. Not wanting to be treated badly, going on strike, not accepting the general thing, people splitting up from each other. I mean, there's major numbers of divorces going on, or split ups at this point, because it hasn't been that long, but a record number of people making out their wills. And another thing that's really super interesting, Chris, is that as the North Node goes into Gemini,
Right.
well, a month
That's a
after it
big
goes
movement.
into
No, that's huge. June 4th, I think it is.
Yeah, thank you. Well, when it gets to 27 plus of Gemini, that is bankruptcy granted to a man who leaves the court. So I don't want to frighten people, but there's
Right.
the North Node is going to go over the bankruptcy degree. But what's really interesting about the bankruptcy degree, bankruptcy granted to a man, he leaves the court, and we don't care about gender bias too much with the Sabian symbols, so we don't
No, of
worry if
course
it's
not.
to a woman. But that can mean more breakups. It can mean, it doesn't have to mean bankruptcy, although of course it can. It can also mean the banks all being bailed out, big businesses being bailed out, like money going in weird directions, which is what we're already seeing. So, but bankruptcy granted to a man who leaves the court can be when we decide we're not going to beat ourselves up any longer. We're going to stop judging ourselves and others. That's really important with this North Node going over that degree.
Well, it's
And
huge.
also,
Anytime the nodes change signs, it's a huge
yeah.
departure. It's a huge departure every 18 months, right? 18
Well,
years.
what's been happening exactly every 18 months? So what's been happening with the nodes in Cancer, of course, is we've been, we've had the nodes in Cancer the last couple of years, but a year and a half. But with the last few months, the North Node's gone over some of the hardest degrees that we could ever encounter. 4+ of Cancer 5 is the train wreck degree.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
And 3+, which means Cancer 4, because you always round up 1 degree to get the accurate Sabian symbol. Cancer 4 is a cat arguing with a mouse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those are tough symbols. Yeah, they're tough degrees.
Yeah, they're really tough symbols. 2's tough. 1, they're all tough. And now,
well, what I find fascinating about this is all foretold. This was all foretold. This happened. These symbols and imagery and definitions were all derived and scribed back in the 1920s, 1930s. And here we are in a cycle which would be an 84-year cycle roughly, which would be a Uranian turn of a time when these symbols are really elaborate and relevant to where we are right now. They're really relevant, which is remarkable. So you have to be able to intellectualize this in a sense where you take the theme of the symbol and expand on it. What does it mean when you expand on that theme and bring it into a place where, okay, that fits into my current arena? It's very accurate. This is what's remarkable. This is why I think it's important to understand the Sabian symbols, because there is a remarkable transcendent sort of divine intervention sort of thing. Call me crazy, but that's what it looks like and that's what it feels like, and it is accurate. That's what is amazing.
Well, thank you, Chris. But the thing is that, you put it so well. Uranus has been for months, and just recently, when all this COVID thing broke out, Uranus was on Taurus 5 for ages, for a couple of months, which is a youthful widow, fresh and soul cleansed from grief, kneels at an open grave, ready to receive the secret to eternal life. And so, Uranus on that degree, it's been on that degree the last couple of years on and off, the last year and whatever. But it was sitting on that degree. And it's a big part of this latest new moon as well, because it's the degree following the new moon and it's the degree before where Uranus is. So, it's hugely, the widow at the open grave. And so a lot of people think
very symbolic, very symbolic. Yeah.
A record number of people are writing out their wills. I'm hearing
that.
Well,
understandably so. And then, of course, this whole absent sort of there's this vacancy when it comes to the death and the whole process. And so, widow looking into an open grave kind of reminds me of the emptiness that you feel when people are having funerals and they can't even have people come to their own funerals.
That's exactly right.
What a sad time to make it through life to the 80s or whatever, and all of a sudden you die and you can't have your grandchildren at your funeral. I mean, maybe you don't know it or not, but it's a very sad, it's a symbolic sort of emptiness, loneliness that this has brought upon us. And it highlights, I think, where we are in some ways as a species more so. It's great to have the internet. It's great to be able to connect across globes. I couldn't talk to Lynda right now had we not had that. But Are we missing what's going on in our own little 5-10 mile sphere? Are we missing that? That's the thing.
That's really so interesting, Chris, the way you put that as well, because Uranus right now is on Taurus 7, which is the woman of Samaria comes to draw water from Jacob's well. And what we're hearing is people are saying, if you're not from our tribe, go away. There's signs up in countries, towns saying, do not come here. And the woman of Samaria comes to draw water from Jacob's well can be like, oh, I'm from a different tribe. Can I please have some water? And of course some people say, no, get your germs away. No, you're not from my tribe. On the other hand, of course there's people saying, of course, draw from the well. Of course, we're all human beings here together having a human experience, and a spiritual one, naturally. But, the woman of Samaria can really talk about, if you're not from my tribe, go away. And so that's on its negative course as well. And so we can feel like, what's happening within a 10-mile radius. I mean, it's just like, oh my God.
Well,
It's
that
just a,
shows the great duality of life and astrology in
yes,
general, because on one side they say, no, get away from me, get away from my tribe, keep me alone, we're fending for ourselves. And the other side of it is, which is the inverse, which is come into the tribe, we will feed you, we will give you water.
that's right.
That's the whole disparity. And so how we navigate those roads, this is what I think life is all about, is this polarity. How we navigate those decisions we make, astrology can be incredibly enlightening, and the Sabian symbols in particular can really highlight the greater theme there. This requires some thought, and people don't always want to spend time thinking these days, but they want the answer quickly. But astrology is an intellectual study. It requires thought. It requires philosophy. It requires a greater picture of the world, and so you find the right symbols, and you can see that there's a positive and a negative to every symbol, and that's what I think that's the essence of astrology and life in general. Is a duality.
Yes, yes, it totally is. Absolutely. Something else that I think it might sound a bit confusing at first, but where Pluto's going retrograde like now is on the last minute of Capricorn 25.
Right.
It's 24:59 of
Right.
Capricorn, so
Right.
it's
Very close.
going
Yeah. Yeah.
retrograde right on that last minute. Doesn't go to the next degree, although the next degree will totally work. But it's the Oriental rug dealer in a store filled with precious ornamental rugs. Well, you might go, well, what's that got to do with anything? Well, this is about buying and trading. It's
Oil.
about appreciating the products of your culture. And perhaps now we will appreciate things so much more, because we're not so easily able. Well, online buying. The Oriental rug dealer in a store filled with precious ornamental rugs. Lot of online buying. That's going through the roof. I mean, I know.
Well, what else
I've
can
done
we
it.
do? We have no choice. We want to buy, we want to consume still, but yet we have no place to go. We can't go shopping, so we have to. This changes the
That's
whole
right.
paradigm. This is why huge stores in America are closing, because no one wants to go out and do that anymore. They just can't do that. So this imposes a huge game change. It's an enormous
It
game
really
change of the
does.
highest order. You know, major stores in the United States are going to go bankrupt as a result of this. So,
Absolutely. And a lot of places, in Australia, of course, Qantas isn't, has gone down the tubes, and Virgin, are going down the tubes, and, we're not traveling, we're not going anywhere. And if we attempt to go anywhere, we find a great deal of money. So the Oriental rug dealer in a store filled with precious ornamental rugs, it really is, I think, appreciating the products of our culture, and seeing, and seeing that sometimes people are trying to sell us a rug, for $600 when it's worth $9.50. There's that thing of like, what is the worth of things, and people trying to get more money for
that's
things,
all
or
perception. Yeah, I know. It's hard to.
yeah, yeah, and selling things for a lesser amount or for a more amount, like, scalping like they do with tickets. They've been doing it with toilet paper. There was one person in Australia that bought $10,000 worth of toilet paper or something. She's going to be in the toilet for a long time getting those gone. So, and the shops wouldn't take the toilet paper back, which I found
Good for
very.
her. Yeah, she shouldn't have been hoarding.
That's exactly right.
Right.
So the woman entering a convent is the major theme, though. But not only that, there's also another one: a soldier receiving 2 awards for bravery and combat. That's where Pluto goes back to, when it goes direct later on this year. And so I am a bit concerned. Don't want to scare people because it's not the objective, but I am a bit concerned that war might break out, on some reason, because there's so many components to this shutdown in the world. And it's much more complicated than I would understand.
Well, I agree. I agree with you. I don't think. I mean, I can see a form of a war, quote unquote, war in quotes, because I think that we are in a war period with the environment in some capacity. I'm not sure if anybody has the ability or the resources to engage in a war right now, a physical war. And if it was a physical war, it would not manifest the same way. The war that we're under
Yeah.
right now is a different kind of war. War is not conventional tanks and men on the trenches with charging bayonets. That's not war anymore. War is now a cyber war, and it's a viral war. So the question I would ask is, are we being duped by Russia and China, because Russia has done the cyber piece of it, and China has brought on the viral piece of it. And I'm just speculating here, so don't. These are not my,
Sure.
but you can see where the theories go, and
Yeah, yeah.
how logical that might make. It does bring the United States to its knees. and they've got the right person in charge to make the clown car stop. So it's
Well,
not.
that's exactly right. And I mean, it's hard to know. I mean, I think it's China, then I think it's the States doing it, and then my
I don't think
brain
the
goes
states are
to
doing it.
somewhere else.
I think it's Russia. I think Vladimir Putin's incredibly intelligent. I think he's got a
He
greater.
is.
I think he's got a greater plan. He's no one to be. He's no one to be poo-pooed. That's for sure. He's much smarter than he appears. And I think that there's a game going on behind the scenes. Of course, we don't know that. I don't want to speculate on that. But what I find fascinating is that the astrology actually supports what we're seeing. We're seeing. This is why the Sabian symbols, I think, are so relevant for the time, because they sort of set the stage. They paint the background. They lay the foundation for what we're going through. And it's not that hard to see how we go in this dip and then out again. I don't think that the pandemic overall is a time of enormous. Well, it's going to change this dramatically for sure, but it is I've always thought as the Saturn, Pluto, Jupiter conjunction in Capricorn as a major corrective, major responsible correction. That's what I've always. Those are the three words I chose. Major being Jupiter, responsible being Saturn. Correction being Pluto. That's how I always saw it. A major constructive, a major responsible reconstruction. So that's the way I saw it. But
Does feel like that. Yeah, absolutely. I want to make sure that I comment on the last full moon that happened at the end of the first week of April, which is just, a couple of weeks, 3 weeks ago or whatever it was.
Right.
But that full moon was the Sabian symbol is Libra 19, and it's the gang of robbers in hiding.
Oh.
Yeah.
Libra 19.
So, yeah. And I always notice when this degree's around. And the gang of robbers in hiding can be our fear, naturally. It can be the COVID virus. It can be the government working against the people with some strange, conspiracy thing going on. It can be where we're afraid of others. We're afraid of our neighbours. We're afraid of, holding hands with someone that we haven't seen for a while, or kissing them, for God's sake. We're afraid of... We're afraid of things moving in the dark. We've really been made afraid. And it's interesting because the degree before that full moon is 2 men placed under arrest. Well, that's what's happening. People are arrested from being together. It's also Donald Trump's Jupiter, 2 men placed under arrest. I'll just say the whole symbol because it's quite long. It's 2 men placed under arrest are brought before the tribunal of society to give an accounting for their actions. Huh. So that's the degree before the last full moon. The actual last full moon was the
it's sort of a testimony then.
Yeah, yes, it can be testimony. It can be people ratting on each other. It can be report your neighbour. 2 men placed under arrest. Yeah. They're taken into separate rooms. When the 2 men are placed under arrest, they take them into separate rooms. They interrogate
different stories,
them.
right? Yeah, right.
Different stories. Yeah, or one ratting on the other.
Yep.
It can be they have exactly the same story because they did nothing wrong and should be released back into society. There's that too. People falsely arrested.
I can see that. I can definitely see that. Yeah, I can see that for sure. Very, very interesting. We're talking today with Lynda Hill, the one and only Lynda Hill out of Australia. You get that Australian accent there with her. And
yes.
she's the brainchild behind SabianSymbols.com. So it's SabianSymbols.com. SabianSymbols.com. Great website. There's an oracle on there which you can pull up to ask a question, which is very interesting, kind of like doing it's an astrology tarot mix in a way. It's got a great feel to it. And we're going to take a quick break and we'll be back in about 2 minutes. But in the meantime, check out her website, SabianSymbols.com, and look it up. And also her book, The Sabian Symbols as an Oracle, Lynda Hill. It's Lynda Hill. She likes to be a little bit of contrarian there with a Y in her name.
My father did that.
Okay, we'll attribute to your father.
The choice of the spiritual path. That's why he said he gave me the Y.
Good man.
So I could be spiritual in my life.
Good man. Okay, so we'll be back in about 2.5 minutes. Check out SabianSymbols.com. We'll be right back. Thanks for listening so much. Take care. Bye. What is your destiny? Where are you going? What is your real purpose? Do you know? Do you want to know? Of course you do. It's your duty to yourself. We are all here for a reason, and we all have great potential. Discover all of this and more with a professional astrology reading. My name is Chris Flisher, and I can help you. Discover your strengths and work on your weaknesses, and live your life to its fullest capacity.
Based on your birthday, birthplace, and birth time, an authentic astrology reading will allow you to live your life to the fullest and reveal your true purpose. Only real astrology can give you real information. It is your destiny, and it is your path. Write me at chris@chrisflisher.com and book a reading today, or call me at 978-393-1036. That's 978-393-1036. www.chrisflisher.com.
Astrology is the science of spirit, and it can serve as an invaluable aid in making the difficult choices in life and seeking truth in all the directions we choose. It holds the potential to allow each of us to evolve to our highest potential. It is the logic of the universe, the code of existence, and the pathway to true wisdom. It is our duty to draw from it the instructions for our lives and to live them to our fullest potential. As the great wheel turns, we are best prepared when we are best informed.
As the world shrinks and our barriers come down, diverse cultures are striving for harmony, balance, and peace. To ease the transition, we need to expand with color, light, and tolerance. Now, you can become a global citizen and embrace the color and clear spirit with the divine artwork of the mandala. Mandalas are a timeless artistic offering for creating unity, harmony, and peace. My name is Chris Flisher, and I've spent years creating mandalas, and they are now available online at www.turningofthewheel.com. Come and experience the world of color, form, and function with t-shirts, coffee mugs, note cards, and limited edition prints. These vibrant, lively paintings and products express optimism, oneness, and spiritual balance for all who use them. www.turningofthewheel.com. That's www.turningofthewheel.com. And enter a world of possibility and color.
Okay, welcome back to Turning of the Wheel. My guest today is the one and only Lynda Hill. She's the author of the Sabian Symbols as an Oracle. It's Lynda, Lynda Hill. You've seen her if you look up her on Amazon. She's also on Facebook as well. And her website is sabiansymbols.com, SABIANSYMBOLS.com. And the Sabian Symbols have always fascinated me because I see it as an oracle of sorts, almost like a tarot deck that came down through some sort of divine intervention. I would say, if I went back to the day when this all happened, I'm sure Lynda has done this, it's almost like a Uranian bolt out of the sky, this sort of bolt of electricity that came down and touched Elsie Wheeler and Edmund Jones and got it to a spot where they brought these symbols that came up, and they seem to be incredibly relevant for all the degrees of the zodiac, depending upon how you interpret them. And the accuracy is there. So we're talking about the current Pluto retrograde. We've also got Saturn going retrograde. We've got Venus going retrograde and Jupiter going retrograde, all at degree points. And the stories are there. They're embedded in the Sabian symbols of the times, and it's just remarkably accurate. So when you look at this, going back to the 22-degree mark in Capricorn, so that would be read as 23 degrees Capricorn, right, Lynda?
Yes, that's right.
It's 23 degrees.
Awards for bravery. Feels like there's a combat. Yeah, that's 20 plus. Yes, but we do need to be brave. You know, it is very much about, bravery and the soldier receiving 2 awards for bravery in combat. Of course, it can be the opposite way. We get fined if we're, out on the street too much, So, yeah, we have to sort of be a brave soldier in our own lives, in a manner of speaking, especially with that next degree on being the woman entering the convent. We're really feeling that, really quite extraordinarily, the woman entering the convent.
No, it seems like a really relevant. It means like a very relevant. It's prescient in some way because it's so accurate for the time that we are all shelved into isolation in some ways. And a woman being introduced to a convent is sort of entering into a spiritual realm, which many of us have entered into because of the time that we are in. We're having to spend this reflective time alone. And one thing I want to point out, be really important, is that once you know your Sabian degree, It may be whatever that number may be. You always look to the one above that. So supposing you look at your sun is 12 degrees Aries, 5 minutes, you would look at 13 degrees. I just want to make sure that people know that technical detail, because if you're going to look at it yourself, you find your own sun, your own moon, or whatever your ascendant, you want to take it to the next degree up from where you are.
That's right. That's exactly right. It's the only complication. But what I find is if you don't round it up, it still works. And so that's how I came up.
It does.
That's how I come up with some of my theories on how Sabian symbols work. The degrees before and the degrees after work as well. It sounds very complicated, but it flushes out the story. But with the woman entering the convent, what I'm seeing also is that a lot of people are cleaning up their houses. You see, the woman in the convent, just being archetypal about her, she's someone who'll scrub the floor. She'll scrub the walls. Like she'll get in the cupboards and clean out the cupboards and really clean them out. Because the woman entering the convent, part of it is about work. And even though we might not be working like we normally work, we are certainly about our spiritual work, which involves cleaning up our space. And what I'm seeing is a lot of people are throwing out, their 15 tennis rackets, or, they're taking them to the Red Cross or whatever they do.
That's
everybody's
me.
been doing it. Yeah, no, everybody's been doing it. It's like just been nuts, and the St. Vincent's de Paul have been, packed out with books and stuff. So I've been doing it, and I feel so much better that I haven't finished yet, but I've made a good thrust of it, and it seems that I've got plenty of time to continue doing it. But so the woman entering the convent, it is the spiritual passage, most definitely, and that's the most obvious thing about it. The loneliness is also one of the most obvious things about it. But the dedication to work is something where we can get on top of the feeling of isolation. We have to. Of course, some people can't work, but the dedication to work can be where we download an ebook and we start to learn something new, or, we have to go into study. It's one of the major components of the woman entering the convent is study and taking things in, and furthering our spiritual connection. And
Well, you know what it is? It's
meditation.
It's an inward look versus an outward look. We're looking inward. We're trying to find meaning within our own lives in ways that add values, that gives us longevity, rather than looking outward. We've been so distracted by the electronic world that we live in that this inward look is really important. Now, granted, nothing wrong with cell phones. I rant about this a lot. I'm not mad at, say, Facebook. I'm just saying, but as a result of those basic things, we have lost something. I'm not saying there's not a trade-off. I think it's a good trade-off. We're all benefits of both ends of it, but there's a trade-off there somewhere. And so looking inward brings us a great sense of clarity, and I ultimately think it will bring us a great sense of peace.
Yes, well, I think, people are, they're waking up to their relationships. Some people are realizing they don't want to be in a relationship any longer. Have not been putting enough work into their relationship, realizing that how much the other person means to them, because there's been this terrible scare and the widow degree,
that's really relevant. That's really relevant.
Oh, no, that's huge. Mm-hmm. And, for people who might not understand, it only happens for a few months every 84 years. I mean, it's something that happens all the time. Every 84 years, Uranus is going to go over this degree, a couple of times maybe, usually. So it can go on for a few months. But it's like, it's really cementing a lot of how we feel about our place in the world. And I really do see a lot of very good benefit in this. But I'm seeing some very strange things, and I won't go on about the politics of it because people are listen about politics. But I'm seeing people that are on the left really moving more towards the right, and those on the right are moving a bit more to. I mean, I'm seeing up is down, in is out, on is off, off
There's
is on.
the duality. There's the duality I'm talking about. Yeah, the duality.
We're seeing this everywhere, and it's discombobulating. It's like your brain goes, how do I take?
Well, it's hard to process. It's very hard to process because it's this disparity. It's a polarization. It's a negative, positive polarization. This is what all the universe is composed of. I think this is what makes the world go round. It's this negative yin yang. It's this positive, negative energy going back and forth. And for every good, there's a bad. For every bad, there's a good. And it's this constant swirl that we are part of, and we just have to accept that. And the more we accept it and go with the flow of the river, which is what I think Pluto is leading us to, is sort of bringing us to a place of departure, a place of reconstruction. If we fight that, we will fail. If we go with that flow and go where Pluto takes us, I think we will arrive in a better place. I do believe that. It's just hard getting there.
We have to be empowered. Yeah. Sorry to cut across you.
No,
but
that's
it's like,
fine.
we need to feel empowered within ourselves, especially with Pluto, going retrograde right now. It's sort of like, okay, how can I empower myself in this situation? I think, for a lot of us, I know I've already said this, but for a lot of us, lightening our load, whether it's no longer seeing that friend of yours that's a narcissist and you feel bad every time you see her or him, or whether it's, some relationships with some people, reaching out to people and telling them how much you love them, that they're really important in your life, whether it's throwing things out that you got in your garage because it's like you just can't stand looking at those 17 rackets. We never play tennis, ever. I've got 9 suitcases.
9 suitcases.
Good luck getting on a plane.
Wow.
Oh, something like that. The ones and the big suitcases, and every time I'd go to the States, I'd buy myself, I give them to the Red Cross, but I've got so many. I'm just like, I'm looking at them going, you can't even go anywhere right now, and I've got all these suitcases.
You can't leave the island you're on.
No, it's like, yeah. So So, you can even look at the opposite. The opposite of where Pluto is on the woman entering the convent is the degree that talks about
it's 23
triangles.
Cancer, right? 23 Cancer?
And it's the way on the sea. And 23 plus, so Cancer 24 in the Sabian symbols. And so it's like 2 women and a man cast away on an island of the South Seas, or it's 2 men and a woman. It doesn't matter. It's 2 one and one the other, and it doesn't matter if there's just 3 men or 3 women. It doesn't matter. It's people having to get along that are locked away somewhere. So it's really super interesting to look at the opposites and the squares. I know I sort of said that earlier, but you can do it for these slower moving
I think
planets.
that's one of the.
It really shows it.
No, I think what this illustrates more than anything else is the whole idea of this duality. I don't want to keep coming back to the same subject, but it's very relevant right now because astrology is a dualistic, and we are a dualistic people. We are dualistic by nature. This is what drives us. We have this element of plus and minus. We all have assets. We all have liabilities. And this is what makes the universe spin. This is the magnetic charge. I think it all comes down to the same thing. The magnetic charge is there. So we look to the opposite to find the answer. And in many ways, that is where the answer is. If you're coming to a situation where you have a crisis with somebody, look to the exact opposite solution of what you might think, and you might find the actual solution right there. It always seems to be. It's the idea of, you've heard this before perhaps, Lynda, that the antidote is always next to the poison. So in the United States, if you get poison ivy, which is a rashy, itchy thing that you get, the antidote is right next to it in a different kind of weed called, I think it's called gypsum weed, I think. Anyway, so they're right next to each other, but they are the opposite of each other, and yet they are there together to work together. It's the great polarity.
Yeah, well, I think, we're seeing, as you pointed out, like we're seeing cleaner skies. You can, if you have to go out in your car, not many people are going out in their car, but, the streets are pretty empty. And, everything is like sort of coming back a little bit to homeostasis. Is that the word I would use? No, probably not. But anyway, it sounds good. But it's everything is coming back to a much cleaner thing because we've all stopped we've stopped our activity. The one thing I am concerned about is the supply of food. I'm not saying it to freak people out or anything, and I certainly don't mean ever to do that. But there is going to be, if this continues, there's going to be issues with the supply of our needs. And we've taken that for granted for a long time.
Yep, I think you're totally right.
It's just natural, isn't it?
Yep.
If I thought this from the very beginning, I went, what's going to happen, especially with these the Sabian symbols for the full moon, like on the supply chain, of the cafeteria and the table set for the evening meal and the truck drivers and the refrigeration. I mean, that's all, they're ploughing food into the ground. And Venus goes on the dancing couples crowding the barn in a harvest festival. It's sort of like, we do have to keep dancing. we do have to keep celebrating because it's our human right to keep celebrating. It buoys us. It makes us
Well,
feel better. It makes us
I think you're
connect
right.
to our heart.
I think you're totally right. That's very well stated. But I would also want to say that, you know, the food chain, the supply chain, the food that we're getting or are not going to be getting in the future, is it's sort of a tearing down of an earth-based structure. So this is Capricorn, an earth-based structure being torn down so that people are forced to grow herbs and food in their backyard. They're forced to get a little victory garden going, perhaps buying local food versus food that comes from China or across the globe. You know, being more localized. This is a forcing of that. It's almost forcing us back to this basic primal world where we have to sort of live off what we have in our immediate area.
Yes, absolutely. Well, there's a lot of people who live in apartments, you see. I mean, if
I
you
know,
went to
I
Hong
know.
Kong, no one in Hong Kong much can have a garden. I mean, it's just not
Just
going to happen. You
impossible,
could
I
grow
know.
some parsley, you know, and it is symbolic, some of it as well, because it makes us feel like we're contributing, even if we just grow parsley or some tomatoes. You know, I
Yep,
mean,
no, I get
tomatoes are
that. I
pretty
get
easy to
that.
grow,
Yep,
right?
yep, yep.
So yeah, but most people can't really grow food. But yes, we turn to that. You know, there might be gardens naturally. You know, a lot of people have a community garden, and that can be really, because I think that a lot of people really do need to get their hands in the soil. I think that
That's
a
the
lot
whole
of us have
Capricorn.
forgotten about that.
That's the Capricorn. It's the Earth.
Yep,
Back to the
and the
Earth.
Taurus thing,
Yep, back to Taurus. Yeah,
and
exactly.
Uranus in Taurus.
Yeah.
You know, we're really getting these hits on our physical reality. Excuse me. And, you know, well, the trick is, Chris, even though you and I are astrologers, and I don't want to put down astrology, but we really don't know what's going to happen. I mean, we want to know what's going to happen, you know,
No,
and we
I would
can
agree.
we can extrapolate.
Right. I would agree that we don't know what's going to happen, but we know something is going to happen. And so this is the great conundrum with astrology. So, I mean, you and I were probably talking about this. Believe it or not, we probably had a show we did 10 years ago where we may have talked about what's going to happen when this happens. I mean, I can go back and look at my archives, and I'm sure we probably breached on the subject somewhere. But the point of the matter is, it's not so much. This is where you have to be sort of very careful with astrology. You've got to be able to frame it in the right framework, put it in the right framework, the right context, where it applies to you as an individual.
Yeah.
Because the truth is there. I believe completely that the facts are there. It's a matter of how you interpret it. Interpretation is incredibly complex and it varies by person. But I would say that what we're seeing and what we're living through now is what we thought we would be living through. Maybe a variation on a theme for sure, but still, it is the same topic. We knew something big was going to happen, whether it was going to be a political, we've already seen the political shakeup. We saw Boris Johnson, we saw Donald Trump, major departures from what we thought was normal, and they are here as harbingers of where we need to go. So if they did not come along and say, wham, how do you like this, we would not respond. So now that we see that, we respond and we react in ways that make us more evolutionary progressive. This is a progressive state because we have to hit it's like a pendulum. The pendulum has to go so far. The pendulum gets that wall and it hits back and you come. But we could not have gotten to where we are today had we not had the circumstances that put us here.
Well, that's right. Yeah, that's right. I mean, it's a really super interesting time to be alive, isn't it? You know,
Yeah, it is.
You know, because we've got Facebook, we've got the media, you know, of course it's full of fake news, but we don't know, and we don't know sometimes what is fake and what is real, but at least it binds us together. And I think that's, you know, a really big part of what's going on is to continue to feel like we're bound together. But what I am seeing, and we have to be very careful of this, and this is the gang of robbers in hiding and the two men placed under arrest. I'm seeing people really arguing on Facebook about things that they would not have argued about a year ago or something. I mean, you know, people have got to be careful of myself included, of, you know, polarizing, because, you know, suddenly, you know, if you're a right winger or you're a left winger, that makes a really big thing. You know, like it's like no, you're a human being. You know, it's like, and I've got to remember that as well. We get really polarized with our ideas, especially if we're being challenged, and especially in these times where a lot of people are really upset. People people need to reach out to each other, and even just like a 20-minute phone call with someone can really change, your whole day, and remind you that you are loved and people care about you out there. It's very important that we're not just hide away in the convent. On the other hand, what a perfect degree symbol to have for all this going on.
Yeah, what is the opposite of that? What's the opposite of that, Lynda? What's the opposite of that?
That's the two women and the man cast away on the island, you see. So it's
same thing.
It's relationship triangles. It can be where some people are living in a house, people must be going out of their mind, some people, because they're in the house with their teenage son, it can be where we're really cloistered away with people that we might not want to be spending so much time with. We're used to getting in the car and heading off and going somewhere, but now we're all sort of stuck, and there might be people there would be, absolutely, for sure, people who are in a clandestine relationship with someone else, but they're at home with their spouse.
Right.
I know.
And
they're not seeing the other person. There's all these different ways it can come about, but it's got to do with being cloistered with people where there's too many people's needs to be considered, and it's definitely the relationship triangle degree. And by the way, it's Donald Trump's Saturn degree is the relationship triangle degree, the two women and the man. And he's had affairs and anyway, we won't go there, but it's interesting to see that his Saturn.
I think what's interesting about it is the overarching theme that this brings up, which is this sort of relationship theme. The relationship is the common denominator between the two themes that you meant. Whether you're walking into a con by yourself or you're two men and a woman, or whatever the other one was, they are still about relationships, and one is bringing in and one is going out. So we have the inward and the outward. This is what the retrograde cycle brings to us, I think, is that the retrograde cycle brings us to a point where we've gone through the shock of what it means to be home and alone. Now we start recasting our views of life in a different viewpoint because we're seeing things through a different lens. And now we're like, okay, well, maybe this is how it is. And we adapt and we develop new habits, new patterns.
Yes, and I think that is the big part of it is the new habits for us. And I think, though, we really do have to investigate a little bit, like have a look around, have a look around at what's happening, to see things a bit ahead of time. Don't just sit in spiritual seclusion, but like learning something. I think that's one of the greatest gifts of this woman.
Well, that's what I like about Venus in Gemini, that Venus in Gemini really is all about that curiosity factor and sort of, I think of it, I mentioned this to somebody the other day, it's sort of like learning on demand. So I think the Venus in retrograde will allow us to rethink how we learn because it's got that Gemini curiosity. And of course, the opposite of Gemini is the Sagittarius, which means we can learn at a greater level in a bigger viewpoint. It's a very interesting time. And Venus retrograde in particular, being in air signs, of course, I like that. It's all about intellect. It's all about the thought process. It's all about the curiosity, it's about research. And we have all those tools at our disposal now. So we are really embellished in some way in a very rich time.
Yeah, it's amazing. There must be so many people on the internet. Quite often, I'm glad it hasn't lagged during our chat, but quite often there'll be a huge lag. That goes on, especially if I'm watching a video, especially at night. Everybody's on Netflix. I mean, we've never had an experience like this where there's been so much cloistering, so we really see where, a lot of pressure is put on certain parts of society, and on the other parts of society, it's completely just collapsed and there's nothing much there. I mean, it's just bizarre.
Right. So, I mean, this does really test the way the web works. Does the web work? I guess we're going to find out, because the fact that you and I are having a conversation 12,000 miles away, right? You are 12,000 miles away from me, right? For you, tomorrow is Tuesday. For me, it's Monday. Right?
That's right.
Yeah. We're 12,000 miles away. You and I could not be further away.
That's right. I think New York is exactly the opposite of Sydney or something. So you're in Boston,
right?
South
Boston, yeah. So we could not be further away. So we are the exact opposites of the universe. So if I were to drill a hole in my backyard, I might end up in your backyard.
But anyway, you'd be welcome here too, Chris, I tell you, and I think you'd really like Australia.
I would love Australia. Are you kidding me?
Although we're way too regulated here. That's something that really bothers me. But, we've got the free healthcare, we've got beautiful beaches, we've only got 24 million people in a country the same size as the US.
Yeah.
We're the same size. And we've got less than 1/10 of your population.
Yeah, that's the way it should be. And that's one of the greater pictures. This is one of the greater subjects, I think, or topics rather, of what this pandemic brings to us. It brings to us a nature talking back to us in some way. Whether we want to admit this or not, we can ascribe the virus to whatever we want to talk about. But ultimately, nature is the great commander here. And the great commander says, okay, you guys are getting too big. The planet cannot hold you. This is Darwinism in some ways. It's sort of a natural selection. I hate to think of it that way, but it really is that. People who are dying are people who are older, who are in some way incapacitated. I'm not trying to be cruel here. I'm totally empathetic with everybody who's gone and all the heartbreak that goes with that. But what I'm saying is that this may be a greater picture that we're all part of that says, we have to change, or this is how the planet cleanses itself. I'm not sure. It's just a thought. I speak rhetorically. Don't forget. I don't speak with opinions. I speak rhetorically. So.
Well, it's going to be very interesting to find how we get back to the new normal, because we don't know what the new normal is at this point in time.
No, we don't. And it may be completely different. And if you can't shake hands anymore, you can't hug anymore, you can't go to a restaurant anymore, you got to wear a mask. Those are huge changes to us all of our lives. And I still want to see my children. You want to see your children. You got a beautiful granddaughter. You want to see her. You don't want to be away from her. This is not the time to do that. So we have to say, we make a conscious decision, I guess, at some point and say, okay, we do or we don't. And I think that the most important piece, the way to take away, and I'm curious as your thoughts are, that we just come out of this with a renewed sense of importance in that we don't take our lives for granted. This is not a time to be blasé.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. And I think that with so much activity in Capricorn, which, by the way, the Pluto, Saturn, Jupiter thing is on my ascendant, on my North Node and my Chiron.
Wow.
So, and it's opposite my Uranus.
So how has that affected you?
Oh, it's been pretty enormous. It's really been enormous. But, part of it, I don't want to go on about it too much. I had, 2 sexual assaults while I was in Turkey, but I don't blame Turkey. And, it was 3 sexual assaults that happened. And Pluto was smack on my ascendant when they happened. But and I don't want to worry people, I was able to handle it. It was okay. I didn't get, raped or anything, but, it was bad, but I got through it. But what comes from that, is like I realized more and more, I'm realizing more and more of my right use of power, because I am a powerful person. I'm a very scorpionic, very plutonic person. Mm-hmm. But, if I throw my power around a little bit too much, I get really hurt, so it's the right use of power. And I think that's been, I'm still in it. I haven't learnt my lessons yet, as all of us, we're still in it. But it's like knowing when to say no is a big part of this personal empowerment. Knowing when to say yes and meaning it. Knowing when to say no and meaning it. And being okay with your decisions. I think that's got a lot to do with. I love Pluto, even though it can have you hanging upside down, on a meat hook in hell. It certainly can. But I have a real respect for Pluto, and what it speaks to me about is this internal marriage. See, when Pluto was founded, it was founded on, on the priest performing a marriage ceremony. It's like, hello, the priest performing a marriage ceremony was Pluto and Persephone, right?
Right.
And so what happens with us with Pluto is that we're really asked to have the alchemical marriage. It might actually be a relationship with someone else that's alchemical, or it might be our relationship with ourselves, which it normally is more, because then the other one comes along because we've alchemized our feeling about ourselves. In this woman entering the convent, it really can be. We don't have to be a slave. We might feel like we are.
You know what the big word I take away from all this is discernment. Discernment is the big word I take away from this. It seems like that's the most fitting terminology to what you're referring to. But you're right. It's an incredibly challenging point in time, and I think that it's something that we are. It's a mirror to our face that we have to see and accept who we are, and say, okay, we've come this far. We have to correct things. We've made mistakes, and I think this is a very illuminating moment. I mean, we are really fortunate, and I want people to understand this. We are fortunate to be alive at a time like this because what we're going through is so dramatic at the very core level. I mean, this is a very basic, primal, earthbound level. We were lucky to be here now and to be able to experience this because we're going to grow in ways we've not heard before. So, Lynda, we have run out of time, unfortunately. I so appreciate you coming on. Lynda Hill is a wonderful astrologer and is the person who has brought the Sabian Symbols back to life, Mark Edmund Jones. Sabian Symbols, SabianSymbols.com. Sabian Symbols, remarkable story. Really, really, really interesting story to look into, especially if you've got philosophical and metaphysical thoughts in your head. You'll find some real clarity here. And what better time than to do that now while we're home sequestered than to look up Lynda, get a reading with her, buy her books, and understand where she's coming from because she's got a lot of knowledge. And Lynda, thank you so much for coming on today. I appreciate it very much. I know it's 10 o'clock in the morning for you. It's different for me, but we connected, which is all that matters.
I think it's wonderful. I always enjoy coming on your show, Chris. Always fun.
Oh, that's great. Thank you so much. Yeah, good.
Insightful. Thanks.
You've been listening to Turning of the Wheel with your host, Chris Flisher. To schedule a reading with me or to order artwork, you may visit my website at www.turningofthewheel.com. That's www.turningofthewheel.com. Or you can call me at 978-393-1036. Thank you. And as always, be open to possibilities.